What's up, y'all? Gio here. We're back with another review of a game I just played. Pretty interesting match, somewhat fun to be honest. And so we're just gonna get right into it. I was playing as the white pieces, um, and first move was e4. Now, in doing this review, I played this game. This was maybe an hour or so ago, and I messed up a couple of times. I didn't have any true blunders according to Stockfish, but a couple misses and maybe some inaccuracies. But there was a point in this game that I'll point out when we get to it where I really thought I was going to lose. And if you can look at this little eval bar down here where my mouse is, after about the fourth move or so, uh, Black started to get a little bit of an advantage. And then they started to gain right after the opening towards the middle game. They had a significant advantage for a little while. I am going to obviously, this is my first time reviewing, so we're going to see what moves I made that helped me get out of that disadvantage. And we're going to go over some of the thought processes that I had during this game and how I was able to keep my composure even though I was in a losing position. I blundered my queen really early in this game, which I thought it was a blunder. I guess Stockfish didn't because it says we don't have any blunders, but weren't able to recap their queen for a little while after that. So we did play the majority of this game, actually basically the whole game without the queen, and we still managed to win in the end game uh, by resignation. So we didn't actually find checkmate, which I usually, if my opponent resigns and it's not really a super interesting game, I won't really save it and review it too much. Um, Aside from trying to find where my checkmate would have been had I moved on. But anyway, let's get into it. So we start e4. Obviously, textbook opening. It says here the favorite first move of 72 world champion Bobby Fischer, e4. Great opening, obviously super solid, and many different options you take from here. So our opponent plays e6. So they chose the French defense, which is, I'm assuming, what e6 would be. And I've never really played too many people that have done this so far. I mean, obviously, I'm pretty low elo, so most people will literally just go e5 and take this square here, or they'll push. Uh, One of my favorite openings as black is to go d6 and push this pawn here, or sometimes they just go straight here and challenge for the center, and then we can retake. But then we've got a kind of a double pawn situation here. So, but anyway, our next move is d4. So we free up our bishops. We get our both our bishops available to get some movement, and we just take center control. Right. One of the principles in chess that you learn is to take center control, and that's what we've done here. So then our opponent goes d5. Uh, so this is obviously textbook for the defense that they've chosen, and then we go knight c3. So obviously knight c3. It defends our pawn here on e4. It also attacks the pawn here on d5. So it's multi-purpose. Um, and we're just setting up some more pieces we're developing, which is also key. But then our opponent takes on d4, which is obviously what we expect. I need to mute that. I don't talk. Um, so yeah, so that's what we expected to happen. And so the knight here is obviously, like I said, defending this square. So that's now a free recapture if we choose to take back with the knight, or we can leave it and allow this to continue to move forward and then retake, and then still continue our center control on the squares. Uh, but we decide to take on e4 with our knight uh, and just get the recapture. So now we have this here. We are somewhat underdeveloped, but we're more developed than our opponent, and we have center control. So then our opponent plays f6, which is another book move. So they've clearly, truly looked into at least the first several moves of the opening with their French defense. So good on them. They're attacking our knight here, which is a free take because we don't have anything defended. And this is our first inaccuracy. We play f3. Now f3 was ideally to just prevent them from sacking their knight and taking ours. Um, so we were hoping to establish a little bit of defense. Obviously, the best move would have been to just take their knight um, instead of, because it creates a check, which is understandable, right? Now they can retake with queen, they can take with their pawn, and the plan and the reason why I see why this is the better move is because it just opens a hole in their dark squares. So then we can maybe say come in with our bishop this way or whatever it is we choose to do then. Um, that would be a good move. But I get the point, right? Is that they would probably want to take back with their queen simply because they don't want to ruin their pawn structure on this king side that they're more than likely going to castle on. So you don't really want to push these pawns in front of your king and open up some um, like a hole in the defense there. So all good. But we chose f3, just defending our. And I guess in my mind, I was thinking, okay, if he takes here, and then we take here, we reestablish center control with two pawns here, and we still have the ability to, trade off some knights, and we just grab center control. So in my mind, that was the better play at the moment. Clearly, it wasn't. But then they kind of make a miss here. They miss the opportunity to just take our knight and trade those off by developing their knight, which it's saying is not a great move here. Um, I can understand because you're going to attack here, and that's kind of free. And what ends up happening is they do that, and then we just blunder our queen eventually, and we take back with the queen here, and then they just are able to gain our queen for basically free. So that was our mistake coming up. But we decide to go bishop e5. And the reason why we go bishop to b5 is because we want to pin this. So we want to prevent this move from happening. And obviously you can't move this now. It's pinned to the king. So there's a pin here. And we can push this next and try to apply pressure. But that's not really good because then you can just do this while attacking our knight. So we're thinking about all of this in this early game, but we are making somewhat fast moves. And obviously then we are forcing, so from my thought process on this play, which isn't really the greatest play, it's an inaccuracy. So our best move would have actually been to just develop our knight, and that would also defend this square here. So obviously that should have been the play that we made. But we went b5. And the reason why I like this early bishop aggression is because we're going to force pawn moves. So we're going to create some holes in his defense here by forcing him to then apply pressure to our bishop, which we have an out. Then we'll move back here, continuing the pin so that he can't move this knight still, and then forcing him to move another pawn up, and then we just back out of that entirely. And then we still maintain a little bit of an attack here on the e6 pawn, and our bishop stays safe, and we forced a couple of moves here. Obviously, that's not like big brain stuff or anything, but it's decent. But I do see why going e2 was the better move. So we live and we learn, right? So now our opponent goes a6, which is what we expected. It is not a great move. They could have just continued to attack and left because they know we're not going to take here, right? Because then he just takes back and, we lose a bishop for a knight, which is not a great trade. So instead, just continue to trade the knights. And he didn't do that. So he moved to a6, which is what we expected. And then we go a4, continuing the pin. But it's going to cost us a pawn, as it says. We should have just taken, right? So in this situation, it wants us to do this and put this in check, and then force it to, defend this square somehow with the queen or whatever it is, or just take back with the b7 pawn. So we chose to go this route, and it is what it is. Now they win the pawn here because basically they push this up and now they can essentially take this pawn for free while attacking this other pawn, or they could just continue and go in with the knight there. But we continued to move our bishop away, getting it to danger, getting it out of danger, and forcing these pawn moves here, which is essentially what we wanted. Just open up a little bit on the queen side, and that's what we did. So then he finally takes the free pawn, and that was good for him. And then we completely blunder our queen here. For whatever reason, instead of just applying pressure, which we should have because we knew he was going to then take our bishop, uh, we just lose our queen instead with nothing defending this square. So the queen is just clearly capable of just popping in and creating a threat. But we sacked our queen, so we lose it. And the fact that the reason why I'm even reviewing this and showing a blunder like that is because I end up coming back in this game, where most people at this point would have probably just resigned, said, well, I lost my queen, I blundered it, and black has a decent position, but uh, we stick with it. So then we go c3, which is an excellent move according to Stockfish, because the other move would have been obviously continuing the knight to e2 move, attacking the queen, forcing the queen away. But what I like about this move is it kicks the queen with this because he can't take back, because then we have this play, or we have the knight takes queen on this square. So this pawn is fully defended and attacking the queen. So it kind of accomplishes the same thing, but this would have been better because it would also develop a piece. So then he moves the queen away and puts it in a position where it's still kind of a threat, right? It's attacking. It's still on a decent middle square, so it's still a threat. So now we go knight e2, and we finally figure it out that we need to develop this knight. Then he goes b7, which is attacking here, and we see that he's getting his bishop involved. So then we go knight to g3. So in my theory, it's an inaccuracy because they'll win a knight. But I think what I was trying to do here. Okay, so I was seeing this move during the game to put bishop here, but I realized that keeping this here, keeping this knight on this square, would have then protected this bishop from the queen taking it. And so that should have been the better play. But this is why we review games, right? We figure out what moves we could have done better and how we learn and go from there. So our opponent castled on the queen side. Not bad. And then we castled as well. So basically, uh, we castled on the opposite side, and we are now capable of getting our rook involved, and then the opponent goes knight d5. Now, I'm assuming the best play still is to take this knight, which it's saying you should just take your knight and offer that trade, and then just go from there, right? But he let our knight live, which eventually, we're happy with, right? It is what it is. This also freed up the ability for us to go rook d1, because now it's not immediately going to be traded off by this rook. So we kind of blocked his rook from actually defending this move here and getting our rook involved, which is what we do. Now, obviously, Stockfish is wanting us to continually apply pressure to this queen by putting our pawn here. So, yeah, we live and we learn. But I did want to get this developed and in the game, and so we did that. And now this is sort of pinned, so when he moves this knight, this next move, we're just going to sack our rook and trade the rooks. We're losing because we're down material because of the queen. So this is not an ideal move. You don't want to trade your rooks this early in the game. But I realized that I'm in a losing position, a very losing position. And so a sacrifice like that might not be viewed as a good move by the AI. But for me, it was crucial to get this key defender out of the game as soon as possible. considering we have so many other things here that are available to attack. So we just want to minimize that. And even though we have to lose something in the process, eventually we claw back, and you'll see how. So he does make the move, moving our knight out of the way. Instead of continuing to apply pressure to this knight, he just moves his knight out the way, and we can't resist, so we take. And it also wins us a knight, apparently, which is this play here without bishop, which we could have just taken that. So ideally, instead of this rook trade, we leave the rook on d1 and we just take this for free. Should have been the play, but we've seen that rook and we knew that it was our opportunity, because what happens is we take here and we gain the knight, but then the rook probably comes down here anyway, and then we have to do this, this, and this, and move the bishop, and so either way, I guess we still would have gained those pieces. But so he takes with his king, which is actually, in our mind, it's not bad. We got the king to the center, even though it castled. We kind of reversed the castle. And earlier, when we had forced these moves of these pawns, this is why him castling on this queen side ends up benefiting us in a way, because we kind of weakened it. I mean, he does have a little bit of a pawn structure here that's kind of defending each other. But because we opened this side up, it would have been more efficient for him to castle on this side that we're pointing at here. But whatever. I mean, we're obviously not an expert. We're making mistakes. We're down material, and we need to find a way to claw back. So we eventually take that knight, which was good. Like, we got the rook and knight regardless. We did have to sack a rook in the process. Then our opponent goes h5, which I think his theory was he wants to bait us into taking this pawn for free. But it's not free, because then he just pulls the rook down, defends the queen, and puts the rook on a square that's pretty dangerous, all things considered. When he has this diagonal to the h2 pawn, and our king is sitting here, it could get messy, right? So we're not going to take that bait. So I guess he had to try, right? He had to try to bait us into it. But yeah, we're not going for it. So then we play rook d1 check. So just keeping the king honest, making him move back into his little circle, probably wasn't the greatest time to do that. Still, Stockfish wants us to apply this pressure to the queen. And I see it, I get it. But we had a check and we took it. So he moves his king back out of the way instead of just blocking here. And so all good. Now, this is another miss by us to continually push this pawn. It just wants this pawn so bad to be pushed. So, hey, we made a mistake. But the point is, we're still kicking this queen here, because if he takes back, we have the pawn to take back, or we have the rook to take back. So we are still applying pressure to this, and he can't take our knight here for free. He can't take this knight for free. So essentially, the queen does have to move, and he does. He moves it to f4, keeping it on our side of the board, which now prevents this f4 move. So we should have done f4. But now we play a4, which according to this is an excellent move. And in my theory, the point is, I mean, the other move is to do this. I get it. Move the rook over. But this theory is to open up some more on this side. So if he takes, we take, and now we're in a position where we've kind of crumbled his pawn structure in front of his king. That is the plan here. I want to start clawing back here. And at this point in the game, we are still at a disadvantage. But that's about to change as soon as he blunders this queen. And he does blunder this queen. He goes e5. So he's now attacking our bishop, saying, okay, well, we're going to apply pressure to you. But we make the right play. And we go e2. So we go back to e2 with our knight. And we're basically saying, okay, if you want to tunnel vision our bishop, yes, you're going to kill our bishop. But then we're going to take your queen. And so that's actually what happens. He blunders completely and moves to f5, which is like the worst possible move. Because I think in his mind, I guess he's thinking, okay, now I'm applying this pressure here, and I'm applying pressure here, and I have some center control. But why wouldn't you move your queen? Does he not see this play here? I don't care that we're going to lose our knight. we're taking your queen and we're gaining the material back that we had lost earlier in the game. And so that's our first great move of the game, capturing the queen. And then he's like, oh crap, takes back. Then he also lines up take back here or take here. And we kind of make another miss by going take back here. The theory is we didn't want to allow, so obviously the move is to take this pawn because now we're kind of hanging our bishop, and he just decides to come in with his bishop, which is like, I don't know what this guy's doing at this point. He is making some mistakes that completely puts the advantage completely back in our favor. And now we go e6 check with our bishop. So we're forcing a move, and then we're gaining material here. So he moves to b7, and then we take back. So we get that pawn out of the way, and now we have doubled up bishops, which is a really dangerous thing for our opponent. And then, okay, he goes rook h6. So he's committing to a rook lift, threatening our bishop here, even though it's protected here. And then we can also attack this. We decide to save our bishop and move it out of the way, which we do. And that also opens up the d file here. And then he goes g5. So he is applying pressure to our knight, but we just move it out of the way, no big deal. And now we're starting to encroach. We're threatening, we're saying, okay, you want to take our knight with this bishop, then you lose that bishop. And so that's the plan we're thinking of when we make this move. And he actually just goes c5 check, which honestly, for whatever reason, we forgot about this bishop during this whole thing. And so we made that move not realizing he's just going to come in and take. So yeah, that's what he did. He comes in and checks. So actually he didn't take anything, but this play checks our king, which kind of puts us in a spot where we're like, okay, we didn't expect that. We weren't planning for a check, and we should have analyzed the board a little bit better. So then we go bishop d4, which is multi-purpose. So it's not only blocking this, but we're saying, okay, well, if you decide to take, we take with the pawn and we're in a better position. If you don't take, then we can take this for free. We're still in a better position, but we're blocking we're blocking the checkmate. Now, he goes and just ignores that entirely and says, okay, we're going to create another threat by attacking your other bishop as well. So now both of your bishops are under fire. Not a bad move. It wasn't what I was thinking in the moment, and that's what he did. So we had to think for another minute. So we decide, okay, we take that pawn for free, and we still have the threat on this, but it's multi-defended by two different areas. So we're not really worried about that bishop, and we simplified the position. Now, if you look at our material, we are +3. So we went from being down a queen and our opponent being +7 the entirety of the opening and mid game to now being +3. So we took the queen back, we got both of his knights, we got a rook, and we capped 4 of his pawns. So we're up material. We're up a knight at least by this point. So we're okay with trading material at this point because we want to simplify the position and get towards the end game. So then he takes knight, he takes on d5, so he gets rid of that, and that's okay. We kind of expected that he was going to take here, so we knew it was either going to be our bishop that he takes or our knight. And essentially, because we had to move this, it forced us to remove the guard on our knight, and he takes the knight. No big deal. So now we're even, right? He took the knight back. Now we completely equalize the position, but Stockfish is saying we're better. And the reason why is because we have now a way to gain this bishop for free and attack this bishop with our rook and not be punished whatsoever. So that's what we decide. We take on c5, our second great move of the game. It's the only move that works. We found it, right? It takes that bishop out of the game, and now we're up material again. It can't take back, and we're also threatening his bishop here. So we're threatening to remove his bishops. So he moves, good play. He moves it out of danger. But the problem is that we're already up material. So I contemplated just taking here and just getting rid of his bishop here, and then just letting the king take back, and then we can check here and let this come in and then take that and remove all of the pieces. And I feel like we're in a better position with a pawn endgame. But that's not what happens. We go b3 instead, which actually doesn't hang our bishop anymore. It threatens to take the trade here, which he does end up taking it, and then we take back, and now he has no bishops. All he's got is 4 pawns and a rook and his king, and we are up four. We have 4 pawns plus bishop rook, so we're up. We're up +3 here. So he actually makes a decent play, and he moves his rook to c6, which threatens to take this bishop for free, and there's really no way to move a pawn to protect it. So what do? We go rook to d5. So what rook to d5 does, it steps in and defends the bishop. Solely, that's what it does. We're not able to put a check in play right now, so we know that our best play is to say, okay, we're towards the end game, you can take, but then we'll take and we'll be up a rook, and we'll have a better chance at wiping your pawns out here and then moving some room for our passed pawns here. So he goes a5, not a bad play. Essentially, that prevents us from moving forward, and that's kind of how the game stays on this side of the board for a little bit. So we decide, okay, we're also going to move pawns. Now, it wants us to just take and continue the defense of our bishop while also taking a pawn. We eventually get there, but we wanted to push this first and not only free up an extra space for our king to move, but it helps with this line here so that we can start moving our pawns. Okay, so then he checks us. Wait, you skipped ahead a little bit. Sorry. So, yep, c6. Then we go d5 defending. He goes a5, we go g3. Now, the next move was actually rook e6, so he's threatening check here. And so we see that, and we decide that we're just going to take that pawn now, continuing to defend our bishop here. We know the check is coming, and we have a way out, so that's what we do. Now, maybe at this point, our opponent is down material, and they're thinking that they're going to get a draw out of like continuing to check us, but we freed up the space so that we have more than one king move, and so there's no draw going to be happening here. We still have a significant advantage, and we're going to exploit it the best we can. So he does make the check. We move to f2. Best move was to just move up and then probably out, but we move closer because we decide that if he somehow slips up, we can take the rook here, and that's what we wanted. So we wanted to apply pressure to the rook while escaping check, and he has to move out of the way, which means he's not going to check us again, which then gives us the opportunity to go d4 with the pawn. So they want us to just take the pawn. I get it, because now we have free pawns to just keep moving. But this pawn was undefended, and if you notice, he would have attacked this pawn, taken it for free, and then attacked this as well. So, and would have threatened to come in and like ruin our pawn structure. So we just wanted to defend our pawn, that's all. So we move this here. That's a way to defend this square on c3, and that's what we do. Now he checks us again, c2 check, we go to g1. So we just move back. You say, okay, if you try to swipe this pawn, now we just take the king. It wants us to move closer so we can start pushing pawns, but we made the play we made. So he just checks us again. Now he's threatening a draw. If we continue to make the same plays a couple of times in a row, it'll go to a draw, and we don't want that. So we go to g2 now, which is the best play that we had, and he checks us again. So no problem, we're going to move out, preventing you from checking us because we have the cap here. You can't take that. You can't take this. So now we stop the check. We have a check of our own that's undefended. So we're going to exploit that. So he moves to a2, and I'm assuming the theory here is to just take this pawn here and free up his passed pawn. But we're not having any of it. So we check first, force the king to move. King goes a6. Not a bad move. That's his best move. It's attacking our rook, right? Now, the king can't take our rook because of our pawn here. But if he frees up the guard first and takes with his rook on a2, now that frees up the king to take our rook. And so we're trying to prevent this the best we can. We slide over and just swipe that pawn and completely free up all of this. Is uncatchable. Even if he swings in with his rook, we're in a position where he cannot make one mistake or he'll lose the rook. And now we have 2 pawns that are going to be able to pass and go straight towards the promised land. So then he does what we said he was going to do, and he was going to remove the pawn, and he's threatening here, but we do have the defense, so we're not worried about that whatsoever. We're going to continue our play. We did decide to move the rook, even though it was defended. I now I'm thinking about it. I don't know why I made that play. So the best play was actually to just move the rook inward. Okay, so f5 was actually best for us, but we did what we did. So now he comes in and he threatens. So he's like, okay, I'm going to take one or the other. More than likely, he's going to take the pawn, right? So we go g4. We ignore that. We say, okay, go for it. You're going to take here and put us in check, but we're moving our pawn. That's what he does, right? He goes c3 check. We go g2, right? Freeing up the space, giving a room for our rook to take if it needs to. And if he comes in here, we just take with a pawn. So we freed up the best way. Now he probably wants us to just move closer to our rook and walk this pawn, but that's not the move we made. Now, um, yeah, that was I remember seeing him make this play and thinking, I don't know if he thinks he's going to walk this pawn, like he's blocking, but we still have our bishop here that's defended by our rook. And the second you hit a3, we're just going to swipe that. So I don't know. Maybe he wasn't calculating that. But instead, we maintain. So this is how we gain the rook. And it is the best play. And I thought of this all by myself. I'm proud. We attacked the rook here, but because it's a discovered check, because of our rook, he has to deal with the check, meaning he cannot move the rook. Because let's say he moves the rook here as a way to defend the discover check, then we still take with the bishop. Either way, he just has to move. And instead, he goes king b4, trying to move closer, thinking that that was going, I guess in his mind, okay, then you take my rook, I take your bishop. But we're still in a significantly better position with passed pawns plus a rook. So we're totally fine with that. And that's what ends up happening. We just take, right? We take the rook, get the rook out of the game because it has been a nuisance. And then he takes with the king. And then we're in a position where the second we go g5, push this pawn, he realizes I cannot catch him and stop him. Our pawn is completely and utterly in danger. Literally, I just slide this rook over instead of going g5, which should have been the best play. So we go g5 here, and they resign. But it was the best play according to them because we're just uncatchable. We're going to get a queen in a minute, and we're going to have queen and rook endgame with another pass pawn, by the way. And that was the game. So if you notice right here, um, if you notice by this point in the game, in this position, we are losing. We're losing pretty significantly as well. And we're in a position where it's like, okay, man, like, how do we do this? How do we get out of this position? Now I know, obviously, just apply pressure here towards the queen, um, and that could have gained us more material earlier on. But from this moment, after our opponent blunders this queen, we are completely up the rest of the game. We do make an inaccuracy just a couple moves later that swings us a little bit back to almost equal, but interesting, very interesting game. And going back to the beginning, I mean, practice certain openings. Like I've practiced so much of just playing e4, and I don't know all of the main lines. I don't know all of the names. I don't know all of the strategies, but I know that to give myself the best chance to win in these lower elo games and not just be stomped on, um, you play the same thing. So when I'm white, 99% of the time I'm playing e4 and I'm building up from there. And then depending on what my opponent's first move is, he played the French defense. So we just went d4, took center, right? He gave us the chance. He didn't challenge our center just yet. And so then we apply our knight move. We apply taking with our knight. We did make obviously a mistake here instead of just trading off the knights. But, I mean, eventually our opponent blundered themselves into a loss. where they just were like, okay, we lose. Like, we're not going to let him get to the promotion and get to his queen. But if you look at this position, and then all you go 47 moves later, where we make our opponent resign. Um, I think there was obviously some moves towards this end game that I could have played better, but I think the end game was significantly my best portion of this game. A little bit of the middle game where I turned it around and was able to capture their queen um, was definitely pretty good. But yeah, I agree. There is some uh, seriously good end game moves here that you know, I enjoyed it, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as well on my journey um, in this new hobby, this chess journey that I'm taking. Hopefully, you guys keep watching and um, we can learn some stuff together. I'm not afraid of posting games that I lose as well, and learning from that, and posting my blunders and mistakes I make because that's the key. Is just play, win, lose, draw. You learn from it and you get better. So anyway, until the next one, I'm probably gonna play some more games, and if I get something, a cool game or a cool situation that I'd like to share, I'll post another. But until then, happy chess. Later.